Good morning. I want to ask you to think about your organizations for a moment. Think about what it would be like if everyone in your organization, from the most frontline person up to the top executive, from the newest hire to the longest serving person, what if each one of those people knew what was in your company's strategic plan? And even more importantly, what if they knew how their job connected the dots all the way up through that strategic plan so that they knew how what they did on a daily basis drove company results? What would happen at your organizations if that was the environment? I'm willing to bet you'd see things like better profits, reduced expenses, better customer service, better widgets being made, and so on. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we create that type of environment? We're going to walk down a roadmap for you of how to make that happen in your organization. It's not hard, but it takes time and it takes a commitment. And so we're going to look at a 4-step process to make it happen, and then we're going to look at how we incent people to care about that 4-step process once it's in place. So there's 3 key things we're going to look at. We're going to look at our people's key behaviors. What are the things that they do on a regular basis, day in and day out, that make a difference? What are the behaviors that we're really paying them for that really drive results? Do we know what they are? Have we identified those things? Again, we're going to look at how we build alignment. How do we get our people in line with where the company's going? And then finally, we're going to look at how do we incentivize them? How do we make them care about where the company's going and care about impacting revenues, impacting goals, and so on? So let's talk about some statistics that are out there for a moment. Wharton recently did a study, and they surveyed business owners and said, what's one of the key things that keeps you from hitting your strategic goals? And resoundingly, the number one thing was lack of ownership amongst employees. That employees either didn't know or didn't care about where the company was headed. Or perhaps worse yet, didn't feel like what they did mattered in where the company was going. Secondly, there's another Wharton study that said that some of the drivers of engagement, we hear so much about employee engagement these days, and the rate of disengagement, and we'll look at some of those stats a little bit later. But that basically, if we can create that alignment in people, that they can see where the company's going and see their role, engagement starts to climb drastically. And when engagement starts to climb, what do we see? We see lower turnover, we see better results, we see more commitment. All those positive factors start to get impacted. And finally, we know that alignment is closely linked to job satisfaction. You've probably been to numerous sessions about all the generations in the workplace. And everyone seems to want to slam the millennials. I am not one of those folks. Millennials probably care more about job satisfaction than all the other generations. And that's not a bad thing if we harness that in them. If we can look at what drives them, and now Gen Z that's coming into the workforce, to make a difference, because they want to make a difference. Okay? And so if we can drive that alignment, if we can build that bridge for people, especially the younger generations are going to buy into that pretty quickly. And so let's go down this path together. Any publicly traded companies in here today? No publicly traded companies? Okay, there's some stats for those folks too. If we can build the line of sight and people build this alignment in publicly held companies, we see better stock returns. Okay, so whether we're in for-profit, whether we're in private or public business, whether we're in government, whether we're in not-for-profit, we can make this happen, and I'll try to build that bridge. I'm also welcome to your comments as we're going. So if you're dealing with a specific situation that you'd like me to address, just shoot your hand up and we'll address it today. Okay? So you'll also hear alignment called line of sight. Either one's appropriate. They can be used interchangeably. And all we're talking about when we talk about aligning people or getting their line of sight together, what we're talking about is giving them the perception that what they do matters, and then building on that perception to showing them how what they do matters. So if you look at any of the statistics out there on turnover, you'll see, oh, people quit their bosses or they quit ineffective organizations. A lot of it comes down, if you really look at the statistics and kind of read between the lines, it comes down to this idea that people don't feel like they're making a difference. That what they do day in and day out doesn't matter. That's a very dangerous culture to have in your work environment. And if we can build this and we get them to care about what matters, now we start to get higher returns on goals being achieved and hence the business growing. So there's two ways that we can do this. We can develop what's called a short line of sight. Typically you would look at this with your frontline employees. So, perhaps you have some folks working on an assembly line. And you tell them, hey, you will have been successful if at the end of the day you've made 10 widgets. Well, that's a short line of sight. At the end of the day, they know whether or not they made those 10 widgets. Is that a good thing to measure or not? Let me ask you that. This is where you guys get to talk a little bit. Is that a good thing to measure? You're saying yes. Why? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so at least at the end of the day, they go home, they can pat themselves on the back, and they can say, hey, I made a difference today. What else is good about that that short-term line of sight? Is there a bad side of it? I've seen some business owners in here. You guys, all your hands should be going up. What is wrong with a short-term line of sight?
I would say they're more focused on getting that job done than doing that job well.
Ah, okay. So am I making my 10 widgets, but they're not 10 perfect widgets? They're not exactly what the customer needs. So you have that. Maybe you're incenting the productivity piece too much and not focusing on safety, quality, the other important pieces. So that's a good one. What else is a problem with short-term line of sight? Yeah. They make 10 and they're done. Okay? So a friend of mine is a bank manager. By April of this year, he had already hit his goals. Now, there are a couple problems with that. One, what does he do for the next 8 months of the year in terms of earning bonuses and things? But what that tells me is that the goals weren't lofty enough. And he was able to achieve them by landing one monster account for his branch. So short-term line of sight is okay to a certain extent. There's nothing wrong with it, but there are dangers. If all I do is focus on the day-to-day, think about what would happen. Here's the best way to think about it. When you walk anywhere, do you walk looking at the floor or do you walk with your head up? Anyone walk looking at the floor? Probably not, because you'll run into things. That's short-term line of sight. I mean, think about it. If you're looking at the floor as you're walking, you're taking one step in front of the other, you're seeing one step, but you don't know where you're headed. That's the challenge with short-term line of sight. We need it, we have to build it in, and we'll talk about that. But we also have to look at this long-term line of sight. Long-term starts to take in business cycles, quarterly numbers, annual numbers, perhaps numbers over the course of several years. What's the challenge from an employee perspective with that long-term view? Any thoughts? If you were an employee and I talked to you and said, hey, 2 years from now, we want to increase our revenues by $10 million, and you're a frontline widget maker, what's the challenge there? Yeah. I'm sorry? Daily engagement. So I got to make my 10 widgets. Is that helping us get to the $10 million in 2 years, or is it not? We've got a communication gap there. That's one of the biggest challenges. Who likes a long-term line of sight? Where are my business owners in here and high-level managers? Do you guys like that? Why do you like it? I see lots of heads nodding. Why do you like it?
I like to see where I'm going.
Okay. So you can build a historical perspective, and then you can plan for the future. So if you run a landscaping business and you have a busy time during mowing season, you're also praying for lots of snow so you can plow in the off season. But if you planned your entire business around the months of June, July, and August, that would be a problem. Because you're not mowing in January, February, March, December, okay? And so from a business owner or business manager perspective, we need that longer term view. So our challenge is we have to build both of these. And we have to reconcile both of them, and the process we're going to talk about today will do that. And so when we look at this in sort of a graph form here, our real challenge is that we build a short-term line of sight down there at that individual level, perhaps even the team level. And we build a longer-term line of sight at the department level and the organizational level. And again, these two things are not mutually exclusive. We can do them both, and we have to do them both if this process is going to work in our organization. So let's take a look now at some things we have to think about if we're going to go down this road. So one of the first things is that we have to remember that employees have more faith in that short-term stuff, so we can't exclude it. But also, we have to remember that management will trust the longer term because we've taken into consideration the cyclical nature of the business. We've taken into consideration results over time. And so again, we're going to address both of these things in our communication component today. Some other things we have to think about. It should not be a surprise that this idea of line of sight and how my job connects to the organization's results is higher at people who are higher in the organization and who have longer tenures. I mean, they've been there, they've done that, they've seen what happens. But if we take a look at these lower level and newer employees, they're the forgotten bunch. Maybe we put them through a great onboarding or new hire orientation program. But oftentimes, in my experience, those programs fall short because we have them sign off on policies, they do all their paperwork, maybe we talk a little bit about company culture, but we don't get into the strategic plan. Why is the company the way it is? Why is it going where it's going? Why do we have the plan that we have? So that folks coming in understand that. Heck, I'm all for including those types of discussions starting at the interview phase, so that folks that you're bringing in have an understanding of what they're getting into and whether they can commit to that. But then take a look at bullet 3 up here. One would think that it would make sense if you had a number of different positions in your organization over the course of your career that you would have a greater line of sight, but the studies indicate that that's not true. Why do you think that is? Anyone have a guess on why more positions in an organization, if you've experienced them, perhaps even bopping around through different functions, would lead to a lesser line of sight? Seems counterintuitive. What the studies show is, let's say you have a management development program, and that program says, hey, okay, we're going to bring someone into this training, and they're going to be a frontline supervisor in operations, and then they're going to go to HR, and then maybe they'll spend some time in sales. And it sounds like a really nice rounding process for that individual, and to a certain extent it is. The problem is that while I'm going through that management training process, and I'm checking all of these boxes, am I spending enough time in each of those positions to truly grasp how that position impacts the company? Or am I just checking a box to say, yeah, I was a frontline person for a little bit, yep, I was in sales for a little bit, and yeah, I kind of get it. So I'm not against those types of management training programs and getting those rounded out experiences. And it's a topic for another day, but we have to plan those out so that we don't destroy the line of sight. Because really, the whole purpose of doing that management development program and moving people through different functions to give them a better line of sight, not to check a box and say, yeah, I hit the road for a little bit as a salesperson. Okay? How many of you employ, especially maybe this time of year, a lot of part-time people or a lot of temps? Show of hands. Show of hands. Okay? Those are some of the forgotten people. We're all doing holiday shopping right now. If you have a bad experience at your favorite store with an employee, what's the likelihood that that employee was just a temp for the holiday season? And now, perhaps you've been a loyal customer, but this employee who's only going to be working there for three weeks gives you a bad taste. So we forget about our part-time people. We forget about our temps, that maybe these folks have more customer impact than our full-time people. Would any of you say that those two groups of employees, say part-time or if you have temps, have more interaction with your customers, either directly or indirectly, than your full-time workforce? Does anyone have that? Okay, one. Can you share what those positions are?
They're summer, seasonal.
Some are seasonal. Okay, and what do you do?
A country club.
Okay, all right. So your members arrive, and they want the country club experience. And now you've hired these seasonal folks, and if they don't get that experience during your peak season when you make your money, you're in trouble. And yet, how often do we neglect to educate our part-time and our seasonal folks as to their role in achieving company strategy? So the bottom line here, the message of these initial considerations is nobody's exempt from this. Okay? Nobody is exempt from this idea that we have to help them visualize their role in achieving the organization strategy. So, I love this model. This was developed by an organization called World at Work. And it reads from left to right. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to pick out a couple of key pieces of it, though. If you take a look at the far left, everything starts with business strategy. Everything that we do with our people starts with business strategy. And there are three commonly accepted types of business strategy. And I want you to think about which one perhaps your organization might fall into. So the first one is operational excellence. An organization like this says, you know what, we're going to put systems in place and processes in place that are going to drive efficiencies for our customers. Whether that be in the production of widgets or in the delivery of services, whatever it happens to be, it's all about the behind-the-scenes operation. Can you name a company that you think fits the operational excellence that maybe you deal with on a regular basis? Come on, you know. You guys are bashful. Yes. Okay, so Amazon. Absolutely. You press buy at 10 o'clock at night, and the package shows up at your house 9 o'clock the next morning. If that's not operational excellence, I'm not sure what is. Now, who are they relying on to help them fulfill that operational excellence? I'm sorry? You didn't say the post office, did you? Oh, robots. I thought you said the post office. Like, wow, okay, we got to go down another path here. Okay? Yes, so they definitely have absolutely. Okay? Do they not rely on FedEx and UPS? Who are two very well-known operational excellence organizations? Okay? So those organizations say that's how we're going to drive value to our customers, through operational excellence. The next one is customer intimacy. So these organizations drive their value through the relationships with their customers. You will pay more to deal with these organizations because of that experience. Anyone want to think of an organization that is great with customer intimacy? Yes, ma'am. Starbucks. I hear that a lot. Now, sometimes people want to throw Starbucks into the next category, which deals with products. But let's be honest, except for those of you who are maybe die-hard Starbucks people, is Starbucks coffee really a whole lot different from other coffees you can get? No. Not really. What separates it? The price, okay? Maybe the environment, the fact that they call your name out when your coffee's ready, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, the die-hard Starbucks people, this is where they argue with me. Oh, no, coffee's a step above. Okay, that's fine. But they're all about the relationship. I hear Nordstrom a lot from a service, perspective when it comes to that customer intimacy, that people shop there because of that experience. So the third type is product or service leadership. So these organizations are focused on developing products and services that are second to none. And again, we will pay for those products and services because they are second to none, and we'll pay a premium for them. Give me a name. I'm sorry? Apple. Apple always comes to mind. Is an Apple iPhone really any different from a Droid phone? Okay, it might have a couple little bells and whistles, but not really. It still makes calls and gets text messages and sends emails, right? So when you think about those three types of business strategy, probably your organization falls into one of those buckets. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not concerned with the other two buckets. I mean, you might have a toe in those other two buckets, but I guarantee you that your executives have focused, either knowingly or not, on one of those buckets, that that's how we're going to drive value to our customers. And so the question is, do your people know that? And why? Because if you said to your people, hey, we're going to focus on operational excellence, generally their first question is going to be, well, what about the customer? I thought we should focus on the customer. And we need to be able to communicate with them and explain to them how being operationally excellent benefits the customer. So everything starts with that business strategy. Now, I don't want a show of hands here, but I want you to think about how many of you know for a fact that your organization has a written strategic plan. And if you're not sure, that's a problem. Of those of you that know your organization has a strategic plan, how many of you have seen it? Show of hands, get them up. Okay. All right, so 20% of the room. To me, that's a problem. Now, maybe not every single employee across an organization is going to actually get to open that binder up and read it and digest it. But they got to know it exists, and they got to know how their job impacts it. How often do we see our executives go off on a retreat? And they go off to some swanky place for a long weekend or whatever for strategic planning. And they come back and they've got this big binder, and it goes on a shelf somewhere. And there's our 3-year strategic plan, they'll say. And that's the extent of it. I walk into organizations and I talk to them and say, let me see your strategic plan. Oh yeah, we got that. And they take that binder off the shelf, and when I open it, it creaks and cracks. And you can blow the dust off the top of it. That thing should be dog-eared. It should be dirty, not from dust, but from being in it. It should be marked up and highlighted, because that's the roadmap to our company's success. And if we're just putting it on a shelf and hiding it, then there's no way it can bleed into everything else up here that we do with our employees. Because if you look what happens with that business strategy, it impacts our organizational culture, and then it impacts our HR strategy. How are we going to do everything that's in that total reward circle when it comes to our people? How are we going to pay them, give them benefits, train them, retain them, all of that stuff? But here's where we're going to focus today. If you go all the way to the right, you notice there the whole model kind of connects until you get to that last block, and then we have a two-way arrow. That's where employee alignment happens. If we can get people that are connected to our business, we get business results. And when they're connected to the business, satisfaction and engagement happen. That's where the magic is. So we can't skip to that. We've got to use this model and work our way through it, and it all starts with that strategic plan. So let's look at the 4-step process. Let's assume for a moment that you have a strategic plan that you can work with. If not, you can still do this, because you probably have an idea of where your organization is headed. So if you're sitting here going, gosh, what Ed's saying is great, but we don't have a strategic plan, that's okay. You probably have company goals, and we can work with that. We can work with those to start this process. All right? So, step number 1, what is our core message? This whole process is about communication. What is it that we need to communicate to our people, and how do they need to hear it? Here's where a lot of companies fail in this step. They call an all-hands meeting, okay? 200 people sitting in a room, not unlike this. Company president gets up to the podium and starts talking about how we want to grow organically by $5 million next year, and we want to capture 30% market share, and we're going to open up a distribution center in Asia, and all these fluffy things. And all of those fluffy things mean something to about 10% of the workforce. And the rest of the workforce is sitting there saying, okay, so what does that mean for me? What do I have to do with all of that? How many widgets do I have to make $5 million? How many widgets do I have to sell to help the company make another $5 million? What does all of this mean? So our core message has to be tailored, which could mean that we have multiple messages tailored to individual groups of employees. A message that's tailored for research and development, that's tailored for frontline operations, that's tailored for sales and marketing, and so on. And I believe in giving employees a voice in developing that message. They'll tell you what they need to hear. Don't feel like you have to recreate the wheel. I worked with an organization that was German-owned, and their employee opinion results had tanked on their most recent survey. And they couldn't figure out why, because they had been decent over the last several years. And so I was running some focus groups to try and get to the bottom of why that was going on. And I kept hearing this theme of communication coming up. And it really didn't make any sense to me, because they had town hall meetings. They had weekly department meetings. You went into their cafeteria, there was billboards with all kinds of stuff on there. So it was almost like they were over-communicating, and that's what I was beginning to think the problem was. And so one of the people in this focus group said, Ed, let's go down to the cafeteria and let's look at these bulletin boards. So we did. And I said, well, I see financials over here, and I see this, and I see that. And he says, take a closer look. And so I did, and here's the challenge. Every single financial statement on those bulletin boards, and every time the plant manager got up and gave her update on where they stood, she talked in terms of euros. Now, I don't know about you folks. I don't know what the going exchange rate is. So if you tell me that we're up 500,000 euros, I get the fact that we're up. That's a good thing. But what does that really mean? A simple convert on an Excel spreadsheet turns that into dollars. So do we use things like that? This is a company whose products, I guarantee you, are in your home. They're not some obscure little organization. Yet they made a very basic communication mistake. And so how often do we do that? How often do we use corporate speak, lingo, acronyms, assuming that everyone in the organization knows what they are? Maybe they don't. So ask your people how they need to hear the message. They'll tell you, and then craft your message around that. Watch those company-wide rollouts. They may not be appropriate. Again, if we're going to create a customized message based on who our people are and what their role in the organization is, then I can't stand up here as company president and talk to 200 of you and tell you all the same thing. That may not be the appropriate way to do it. So just be careful. Maybe it's how we introduce it, and then perhaps we go into breakout rooms and we talk about, okay, here's what operations' role in achieving that strategy is. Here's what business development's role in achieving that strategy is. That's a more productive use of our communication time than trying to roll one thing out. Second step is, we have our message. Now what is leadership's role in all of this? And when I say leadership, I mean anyone who is responsible for other people in the organization, not just the C-suite. If you're managing people, you're a leader. What is their role in communicating this out, and how are we holding them accountable for doing it? You've probably dealt with situations, hopefully you've dealt with them appropriately, where you had a manager who was not carrying the company banner appropriately, who was maybe undermining some of what was going on. That's an obvious problem. And it's a problem on a number of fronts, but certainly if we're trying to drive employee engagement and build this line of sight and alignment, we've got employees saying, wait a minute, the company says we're doing this, but my own manager says this. Doesn't make any sense. I've heard from numerous people, they go off to training, company sends them off to training. They come back with all these great ideas. And then their manager says, well, that was great, that was book knowledge, you're in the real world now, forget about it. What message are we sending? We're saying, oh, education's important. We're going to send you off. We're going to spend company resources to do that. But then they come back and they're fired up, and then we squash that. So leaders have to be held accountable to communicating this message, and that that communication is in line with the strategy that we want our people to hear. We need to make sure that they're bringing that vision to life. If you think about great leaders, whether they be in your workplace, politics, religion, it doesn't matter. If you think about great leaders, one of the things that they do really well is they communicate their vision. And they get people fired up around that vision. And so it doesn't just stop with that chief executive who's out there giving the vision. Everybody has to carry that vision down through. I had the opportunity a few years back to hear Tony Hsieh speak. And Tony is the CEO of Zappos. You guys know Zappos? Online shoe retailer. I think they've branched out into some other things. And he told this story. Zappos is very committed to their customer relationships. So much so that no matter what job you apply for there and eventually get hired for, you spend time answering the phones. Doesn't matter if you're hired to be VP of Finance. You spend a week answering those phones. That's a commitment to driving a culture and a strategy. But the story he shared was that they were hiring for a high-level vice president position. Brought in a candidate who had all the credentials on paper. This guy had everything they wanted for. He wowed them in the interview. He leaves. The executive team says, this is our guy. Great. Tony has to leave to go on a business trip right after that meeting. He goes down, gets in the company car, and starts talking to the driver of the company car. Driver proceeds to tell him how this guy was rude to him, belittled him, made smart remarks, the whole bit. Guy didn't get the job. So here's a guy who had everything they needed, but they realized he's not going to communicate our vision. He's not going to live up to what we want because he showed his true colors to someone that he deemed as being low on the totem pole and unimportant. Are we willing to take a stiff upper lip in those scenarios and stick with that vision that we have, even in the face of giving up on what would otherwise be a perfect candidate for a position? Because if we don't, that so-called perfect candidate will kill your culture. They'll kill it, and maybe some of you have already experienced that. Okay, so the next thing is we now need to blend things. So we've got the communication piece in place. We've got leadership communicating the right vision. Now we start to blend those two things together, and this is where your culture really matters. Do your people feel safe enough to communicate with their managers and say, hey, boss, I have a concern. Hey, boss, I have a suggestion. I think this could work if we tried it this way, and not be told they're stupid, that's a waste of time, that'll never work, oh, we've tried that before, without all those other excuses. If not, if we don't have that type of culture, then the process stops here, and you may need to do some culture work before you can go down this alignment path any further. And so folks, to be truly committed, have to know that they can be heard in your organization, beyond just an employee suggestion box, okay? And so when we look at this, this is where the employees start to look for processes that'll support what's going on. So for example, let's say you ran a customer service call center. So you had a bunch of people on the phones taking customer orders, complaints, resolving issues. And my vision as the leader that I communicate out to all of you is we want one-call resolution. I want you to get on that phone with that customer, resolve their issues, don't pass them around, don't make them tell their story 3 and 4 times to 3 and 4 different people. Because we've all been there, right? It's annoying. And I say, you are empowered to make a difference for that customer. Would all of you be willing to buy into that kind of an environment if you were a customer service phone center person? Would you like to have that authority to handle? Most people would say, yeah. But now here's the disconnect. What if on your performance reviews, I rate you on how many calls you take an hour. Is there a disconnect? I'm saying one thing, but I'm holding you accountable to something completely different. You probably can't achieve one call resolution, truly caring about the customer, and meet a goal that's, hey, the more calls you pound out in an hour, the more money I'm going to pay you. People are going to look for those kinds of reinforcers. And again, if you've got that in your system, you have a disconnect. And so this is where our performance management system and the goals that we set for our people has to match up to the goals of the organization. They have to see that, hey, if I achieve my goals, it connects up further to the company goals. And the magic begins to happen. Please, 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 if you're going to measure success, don't do Jelly of the Month Club. What I mean by that is, don't say this is important today, next month it's something else, and 2 months from now it's something else. What's the challenge with working in that kind of an environment? If your boss is sitting next to you and that's your environment, you probably don't want to share. But what's wrong with that kind of an environment? What happens? Yes, sir? Don't know what target to aim at, because it's constantly moving. Moving targets are hard to hit, as the saying goes. So when the moving target is hard to hit, what happens? We give up. So we've done all this hard work, we've put all this communication out, we've tried to get our people aligned, and now we keep saying, well, this isn't working, let's try something else. Oh, that didn't work here, let's try something else over here. People eventually say, you know what, I'm not going to work towards that goal, because guess what? It's going to be a different goal in a couple months anyway. And now we don't achieve anything. So plan out your measures properly, thoughtfully, and then have the intestinal fortitude to stick with them. Now, I'm not saying nor advocating that in the face of a truly horrific situation, you don't change course and say, well, that's not working, we got to stop that. Those things will happen. But you have to give them time to play out, to make sure that if you pull the plug, you're doing so smartly, that you've thought it through, and that the decision is based on your education and data, and not just based on a gut reaction. Okay? So 4 steps to creating alignment. It's when you think about it, it's not that hard, but there's a lot of work there. People ask me all the time, wait, how long does this take? I say, I don't know. Because there's too many other factors in there. Where's your company currently at culture-wise? What's the skill level of your management team? Do you have a strategic plan? Is it a well-built strategic plan? Has anyone ever seen it? I mean, there are so many things that will determine how long this takes. Size of organization matters too. Smaller ones can usually achieve alignment a lot faster than a larger organization. But that's okay. It's about the journey, because the end is worth it. If you can get to that magical point where your people know, understand, and are committed to those goals, your business, if it's founded on a good service or product, it can't possibly fail. Okay? So let's assume for a moment we've instituted those 4 steps. We're there, our people are committed, they're bought in. Now, as with most humans, we get to the what's in it for me. You've told me what's in it for the company if I do all of these things, but what's in it for me? And so this is where our performance management system and reward and compensation systems kick in, and how they've been designed and whether they continue to connect the dots to complete the circle. And so my question here is, what motivates your employees? And we're going to do a little exercise here in a moment. But what motivates your employees? Do you really know what motivates them? Some of you are probably sitting there going, yeah, that's obvious. I know what motivates my people. And some of you may be saying, I'm not sure. So let's look at that. If you think about what the employment relationship is all about, it's not hard. I believe HR, and yes, I'm an HR person, but I believe HR makes things hard. It could be a lot easier, because our whole job comes down to these 2 bullet points. Can we provide total rewards that an employee cares about, a prospective employee? Can we do that? Can we create that right mix? If you go back to that World at Work slide and you look at the circle in the center that has the 5 items in it, can you get the right mix of those total rewards that someone comes to you and says, yes, I will do that job for those total rewards? Because all the employee has to bring is their time, talent, and effort. And we shake hands and we say, yes, we have a match made in heaven. And then this happens. It says if you aren't fired with enthusiasm, you will be fired with enthusiasm. Whose fault is this guy? Anyone want to take ownership for him? Where are my HR people in here? Because I know you're getting blamed for him because you hired him. Okay? But whose fault is it? Usually it's the fault of the organization, and most oftentimes leadership. I used this slide in a presentation to a meeting of business owners. And one business owner was sitting up front, and he started yelling at me. You're right, I'd fire that guy. I want people that are self-motivated. I want people that are self-starters. I want go-getters. He just went on and on. I said, great. Who hired this guy? And this gentleman says, well, I do all the hiring in my organization. I said, well, then when this guy fails, it's your fault. And we got into a debate over this because at some point in the interview process, that business owner thought this guy was self-motivated, self-starter, and a go-getter. So either that guy smoked him in the interview, which obviously can happen. We've all made some bad hires. It happens. But more often than not, it's a good person that we ruin because of our policies, our procedures, our politics, our culture, or a combination of those items. So when we have that deadbeat in the workforce, we really, instead of blaming them, and yes, they do have, they're adults, they have to take some of the blame, but we want to take a step back again and look at our culture, okay? Here's a few more stats to push us here towards our final thoughts. And none of these should surprise you. Over half, according to Gallup, over half of our workforce is actively disengaged right now. That shouldn't surprise you. In fact, if you really think about your workplace, I want you to think about the people that aren't engaged. These are people that they show up for work every day. They're not really achieving anything, and people want to walk around saying, what does she do? Because I don't really know what she does. And Joe's always behind closed doors over there. What goes on with him? Those are challenges for us, okay? Here's another scary one. A third of our workforce is saying, you know what? I'm leaving in the next 12 months. The real challenge is I don't know whether that's okay or not until you tell me whether your key employees are in that 33%. Then we've got a problem. If your high performers are in that third, you have a problem. Now, if the bottom third of your workforce who doesn't meet their goals and everything, if they're that third, let them go. Okay? Get people in that are going to achieve their goals. But that's a challenge for us. Why is a third of our workforce looking to leave us as we speak? And the last one is probably the scariest. That 60% of our workforce would change careers. Think about that for a moment. That means that half of this room right now is saying, I would get out of payroll or HR or whatever your job happens to be. Okay? That's scary, that as a society we are that disenfranchised with our career paths. And what, as HR professionals, could we do to impact that, to open up other opportunities for our people, perhaps to switch professions within our organization? I was with a client yesterday. One of their top performing persons 2 years ago was one of their most disgruntled because of the function she was in. And they said, this woman has talent. Overall, she has a great attitude, but it's just not working. And they had another position that could utilize her skills in another department. She is a superstar. And in fact, what we're working on now is developing a learning and development plan for her to ascend to department manager within the next 2 years. It's been a complete turnaround because all we did was shift her fit within the organization instead of giving up on her. So it can happen. So while we're talking about what our people want, I want you to take a look at this list, and you've got it in your packets there. I want you to pick the 3 things on this list that you think in your organization drive your people's retention and motivation. And just circle them. They don't have to be ordered, just circle them. The top 3 things that in your organization you think people care about the most on this list. Now, there was a survey done, 600 plus companies, thousands of management people in those companies, and they asked them this very question. Here's a list of the common drivers of retention and motivation. Which of these work in your organization? And here were the results. Take a look at the left there. Management climate, the supervisor, and the culture, top 3. Anyone have those same top 3? No trifectas? Anyone have 2 of those top 3 on your list? One of you, a couple of you, okay. How many of you had at least one of the top 3? Bunch of you. Here's the problem. Look at what employees in the same organization said. It's not even close. What is the problem? What is this data telling us? Okay, there is a monster disconnect between what management believes is working for employees and what employees are saying is working for them. Now, typically at this point, someone will look at that employee list and say, yeah, that's wrong, I don't believe that. And you know what, I don't care. Because the reality is this is just one study, okay? Maybe your organization employees don't care about benefits. That maybe it's more, I don't know, the culture. Maybe their supervisor's higher on the list. The message of this slide is, what is the way that you keep this from happening in your organization? Okay, communicate, but how? It's actually quite easy. I'm sorry? Ask them. Ask them what they want. Many of you have probably recently gone through your benefits re-enrollment. And you sat down and you said, well, we offer this and this and this, and okay, great. When's the last time you asked your people what they want? What's important to them? Because I don't care where your management team would fall on this list, and I don't care where your employees would fall on this list. What I care about is, are those top 3 things in sync? Because if not, we get this disconnect. I worked with an organization, since we're here around holiday time. They actually had not in addition to their holiday party, they had a huge company picnic every year. And it was a big blowout affair. And in the early days of the organization, it was like a big pig roast, and it was on their grounds. And people came and families came, and it was a great affair. But as the organization continued to grow, they outgrew their own campus, so to speak. And so they did what a lot of organizations do. They take their event to Hershey Park. So still kind of a cool day, right? You treat your people to the park, and they get burgers and dogs and whatnot. And it was going okay. And then the organization came back and said, you know what, this is getting kind of expensive. They were spending about 40 grand a year on this. And they said, how about if we're still going to cover our employees, but let's ask the employees to pay $5 for the family members that want to come. Now that's still pretty reasonable. I mean, you can't buy the burger and dog at Hershey Park for $5. So the fact that you're asking people to pitch in the $5, for an $80 park ticket, not a big deal for most of us, okay? Push back beyond belief. To the point that over 40% of their workforce was not going to the event. So they're spending in excess of $40,000 to impact 60% of their workforce, and even some of those were grumbling about paying the $5. And I looked at them and said, why are you guys doing this? Why don't you take that $40,000 and let's put it somewhere else? And what did they say to me? 4 most dangerous words. I'm sorry? We've always done it that way. It's probably more than 4 words. But I'm an HR guy. I'm not a finance. I know we got accountants in here. So we've always had a company picnic, Ed. It's the sacred calf. We can't kill that. I said, why not? I thought they were going to run me out of the building. Now take this same organization And one of the other things that they do for all of their people is on your birthday, you get a gift certificate to go to the local bakery, get a cake for yourself. And you can customize that cake any way you want. Flavors, icing, decorations. Heck, you don't even have to get a birthday cake. You could get a happy anniversary cake. Doesn't matter. Costs them $10 per employee to give those gift certificates out, and 99% of them get used every year. What are their people saying to them? We make stuff so hard when it comes to how we reward and recognize our people sometimes. So I don't want you to overthink this list. Just give this list. Get some focus groups together. Give this list of things to your people and ask them what they think they want. You might be surprised at what they come back with, and that's okay. So let's press on here. This is scary. Number surveys pulled together showed that the smallest pay raise that you can give somebody to get them to change their behavior is 7%. When's the last time someone in here got 7% pay raise? Okay? When's the last time you gave out a 7% pay raise? Except maybe for a promotion, probably it's been years, if ever. What is that data saying? It's saying that, okay, so our employees do a good job and we say thank you very much, here's 2%. Let's break that 2% raise down for a moment here. Let's say they earn $50,000 a year and you give them 2% as a raise. How much are they getting? Come on, payroll people, how much are they getting? $1,000. Are they really getting $1,000? No, why not? Taxes and all the other stuff. So essentially, what we've done to a person is we've shaken their hand, we've said thanks for a great year, and you know what? You get paid bi-weekly, so every time you get your paycheck, you can get some pepperoni on your pizza. That's really what we've told these folks. Now, I'm not against giving pay raises. I'm not. But if we think that giving someone 2% is going to change the way they view their job, I would ask you to simply look in the mirror and ask yourself if a 2% pay raise would cause you to act any differently. Now, what do we do about that? Bonuses seem to have a bigger impact. So what would happen if instead of giving someone that 2% merit increase, I gave them the 2% as a bonus? Now, the net is still the same. They're still getting, quote, $1,000 and then taking all the taxes out. But here's the difference. The difference is in the perception. Instead of that remainder being broken out over 26 pays annually, they're getting a check in hand. And if it's around this time of year, maybe that check helps them to buy something nice as a holiday gift for somebody. Or maybe it buys them a flat screen TV in time for the Super Bowl. I don't know. What I do know is this. The studies seem to indicate that when you give someone that sort of lump sum and they buy that nice gift for somebody or they buy that flat screen and they put it on the wall, every time they turn the flat screen on to watch football, they say, that was my company bonus up there. Every time the piece of jewelry is worn by their spouse, yep, my company bonus did that. It's a constant reminder. Versus that little 2% that comes every other week, it gets forgotten after the first couple of weeks. It really does. Now, I'm not saying we never increase people's base pay. That's, again, another topic for another day. What I'm asking you to look at is, how do you allot your pool of money that you use for bonuses and merit pay? And is it doing what it should be doing, which is not only rewarding past behavior, but motivating future behavior? Because if you're not motivating future behavior, you're wasting your money. If any of you are sports fans, just look at your favorite sports team. Look at how much money they dump on a player who's had all-star numbers for 3 years, and they show up in your town and don't do anything. And then you sit there and complain, we're paying that guy $10 million, he can't hit a ball or whatever. Okay? Because you paid him for past performance. There's no incentive for him to keep hitting the ball. You paid him for what he did before. Okay, great. Are we doing the same thing to our people? That pay, those bonuses, whatever we're using to reward our people has to incent their future behavior. That's the value of that dollar being spent. Whether that's in a base pay or a bonus or an extra days off or whatever other perks your people tell you they really want. That's where the power of it is. So when we're going to incent through variable pay, we have to go back to what we started off the day with, and that is, do we have the right measures in place that we can know for certain that an employee is able to impact those goals? Do they have full control over their own goals, or are they at the mercy of other people? There's a place for that, a team goal, a team bonus or something. But what's on their own performance management plan has to be fully controlled by them. Otherwise, all the things that we talked about in the first half of the session are gone because they can't impact their own results, and so they check out. Their alignment's gone. They see what they need to do, but there's nothing in it for them. And so when we look at this, our pay plan, whether it's our variable plan or our base pay, has to stay focused on achievements. Please, if you take nothing else away from today, stop immediately giving cost of living increases or giving flat percentages across the board. Those are the two biggest things that you can do to completely demotivate your workforce. If I know that no matter what I do, I'm getting 2% because every year everyone gets 2%, why should I work hard? There is zero reason for me to work hard. Zero. And people love to debate me on this one, and I'm happy to debate you after the session if you'd like to. Okay? A person's pay has to be linked to the effort that they're putting out and the results that they're getting, if you care about achieving business results. If you don't, if you're happy with where you are and you just want to keep staying on the treadmill, then give those COLAs. Give those those 2% a year. But here's what's really happening when you give everyone the same pay raise. The number one thing I hear is, well, that's fair, Ed. Everyone gets the same pay raise. No, they don't. The only way they all get the same pay raise is if they're all earning exactly the same amount of money. Then that 2% is equal for everybody. But if you give 2% to your entire workforce, not everybody's getting the same pay raise. And not everybody did the same things to earn that 2%. Some people worked really hard. Harder than most, perhaps. You're high performers. They knocked it out of the park. They got 2%. And then you got the other person. They didn't do anything but show up every day and hang out at a desk, and they got 2%. Tell me that's not demotivating. Rethink how you allot your payroll dollars and whether they're supporting your whether those dollars spent are supporting your organization's goals. Think about it in terms of return on investment. You would never buy a new piece of equipment without doing a study on the return on investment that that machine is going to increase production for you, it's going to provide better quality, and what's the turnaround time if we drop 200 grand on this machine? You would never just go to your finance person and ask for a check for $200,000 to buy a machine without doing a return on investment study. So why do we drop even bigger dollars, because payroll probably represents, and everything that goes with it, 30% at least of your budgets, why do we drop tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars and not look at it in terms of what are we getting back for that money? Or are we creating a handout type system? I had an organization a few years back. They were a cabinet maker, high-end, custom kitchen cabinets and stuff. And they were really struggling. And they had a number of issues, but one of the things that came up was their profit-sharing plan, which was one of the most generous plans I think I've ever seen. I mean, people could make a lot of money on these quarterly payouts. And I asked the owner, okay, well, let's talk about, you're spending a lot of money on this profit sharing, and I think it's great, but let's talk about what goes into figuring out how someone earns that money. And he says, or first I said, let me back up. First I said, how many people earn the quarterly bonus? He says, over 90%. I said, wow, so 90% of your people every quarter are doing enough to earn that profit share. That's amazing. How do you determine who's getting that? Anyone want to take a guess on what his one determining factor was? That's a good one, seniority. That wasn't it, but that's a good one. You're actually not far off. Attendance. And I stopped in the middle of our tour and I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Yeah, attendance." I said, "Okay, so you must have some really good attendance then. 90% of your people are here on time every day. That's pretty good." He said, "Well." And they proceeded to tell me, "Well, Sue over there, their day her kid was sick. Well, I didn't dock her for that, so she got her bonus. And Joe, well, he had a flat tire coming to work yesterday, and I didn't dock him either." I'm like, what is wrong with you? Okay? And so then the scary thing was we got back to the boardroom, and we're sitting there talking about it. I said, "Okay, I need to come back to this profit sharing plan. One of the reasons you brought me in is because you want to talk about productivity and everything else, but you've mentioned that sales are down. What level of profit did you make this quarter?" He says, "We didn't make a profit." I said, "Okay. What about the last quarter?" "No, we haven't made a profit in 3 quarters." I said, "Okay, so it's been 3 quarters and since you handed out the profit share?" Oh no, we give that every quarter." What message? You guys laugh because it's silly, but I guarantee some of you are laughing because you're going, "Yeah, we do it too." It's a demotivator. Think about it. If your company is losing money and you are giving people a profit sharing increase, what message are we sending to them? Hey, it's cool that we're losing money. Here's some cash. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll keep losing money. It makes no sense. It destroys the alignment that we worked so hard to get to. Okay, so this slide I give you just as thought. This is not gospel truth. This is just something to think about. I believe that when you're talking about variable pay, that if you're up in that C-level, upper level management, 100% of their variable pay should be based on company success. Nothing else. Not 100% of their pay, 100% of their variable pay. And I'm blanking on the organization, but I just read an article, organization going bankrupt, laid off a bunch of workers, and management has petitioned the bankruptcy court to pay out like $25 million to them in bonuses. Wait, what? Company went, "You drove the company into bankruptcy, let's give you $25 million to split up amongst yourselves." That makes a lot of sense, okay? We see that in the news all the time, but we do it on a much smaller level, okay? But I want you to look at this. So what I'm saying here is that as we go down the corporate ladder, we start to see a different blend of what we have to consider with regards to variable pay. So that mid-level management, I want to start to see some balance between their payouts being related to the company's success, but also their team's success. So here's the example. Let's say a company makes a profit. So there's money in the bonus pool to pay out. My department, however, did not hit its goals. If I'm a mid-level manager, how much of my eligible bonus should I get paid? According to this metric. How much? 50%. The company hit its goals. Now, I heard someone say 0. I might be okay with that too. But according to what I have up here, the company hits goals. I get half of what's coming to me because maybe I did something to help contribute to that. But my team, I don't get that one. Okay? Now, what if my team knocked it out of the park? We hit all of our goals. Company didn't make any money. How much of my management goal do I get? I'm sorry? Oh, at least 50%. 0. Why should I get 0? Okay, the company didn't hit its goals. It didn't make a profit. So there is no money to pay out for team success. We do that too. Again, what message do we send? Oh, it's okay that your department knocked it out of the park, but the company didn't. We're still going to pay you guys. Again, maybe there's an exception to the rule that you could sell me on, but we're sending the wrong message. So again, take it down to the line staff, and look at now it changes to company and individual effort. These percentages, I just threw them up here for purposes of discussion today. Think about, again, your bonus plan, your reward structure. What should it look like for your team, percentage-wise? How much do you want to weight company success versus anything else? But no matter what it is, if the company doesn't earn any money, then there's no funding in that bucket to pay out any of this. So everything has to start with the company earning the profit and hitting the goals it needs to hit to put the money in the bucket to pay out. If there's no money in the bucket, we should not be digging in and paying out. There are exceptions. There are exceptions. Talk about that another time. Okay. So here's a dark side. I want to take you back about 10 years ago. We had the mortgage crisis. What caused the mortgage crisis in America? I'm sorry? Greed. Okay, on whose part? Banks? Be more specific for me. The loan officers. Why? Because they get a commission when they write a loan, do they not? So let's see, you're earning minimum wage and you want to buy a $500,000 house? Sold. Sign here. No problem. Now, I know I'm oversimplifying. I'm not an economist. There are a lot of other things going on, okay? But that was a problem, approving loans for people that were not qualified for them so that I get my commission. That's one of the dangers with variable pay if it's not coupled up properly with line of sight. We have to reward the behaviors that are important to the organization. And in that case, it was sell loans, sell loans, sell loans. So they did. That was the message that was sent. Not sell the right loans to the right borrowers, which is a very different goal. So be careful when you're setting up your measurements and you're building this reward system that you're not overly incenting individual performance and creating that person who will become a bull in the china shop and destroy the hard work that you've set up. And so when we think about individual efforts, you probably have some superstars. Good, you need them. And they should be rewarded as such. But just be careful of over-rewarding your superstars because they're not doing everything alone. There's an element of teamwork here. They get things done likely through other people. So reward them for being your high-impact employees, but just be careful of creating a bunch of prima donnas who think that whatever they do is golden and they're going to trample on other people to get there. Again, you're going to destroy the culture that you just worked so hard to get to. Now, in closing, everything that we've talked about comes back to the culture that we're trying to create, okay? And so it can't be about solo performance. Yes, we have to drill down to individual performance level, but it can't be just about that. It has to be the success of the organization. And so the success of the organization should be celebrated along with the success of that individual. And I love the Lombardi quote up here. I mean, you think about, you can have the best quarterback on the football team, but if he doesn't have an offensive line to protect him, doesn't matter how far he can throw the ball or how accurate he is, he's going to get smashed every time he drops back to throw. So it takes a team effort. Your organizations, to hit their goals, are going to take a team effort. Make sure that your reward system focuses on that team effort as well. But ultimately, no matter what you do, no matter what decisions you make with regards to your people, you know, I go back to the slide of the retention and motivation drivers, okay? When you start pushing those buttons, just make sure that they're not adversely impacting your ability to attract and retain and motivate that key talent. Don't play to the masses. Play to your key talent. What does your key talent want? How do they want to be recognized? How do they want to be rewarded? And build out from there. They're the people you need to retain the most. There are people that are probably driving the bulk of your revenues, your goal setting, and everything. So start with them. Identify your key performers if you have them. Talk to them about what they want to be rewarded with. How do they want to be recognized? And then bleed that out from there. So everything that we talked about today can't be taken in a vacuum. It's a holistic view, and it comes back to this concept of, if I push this button, what will that do to my recruiting? If I push this button, what will happen to my motivation? And so on. So I'm happy to stay after and take any questions, but thank you so much for your time and your willingness to answer some questions along the way. Bottom line is, think about what your takeaways are today. Think about what you can use in your organization, but by all means, take something back, whether it's from my talk, you heard from some great labor folks, other HR people. You came here and spent a morning. Do something with this wealth of information back home. Thank you.